Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about Unit 8, which is going to discuss about economics. So let's check out today's contents. What we'll do today is we will watch and understand a video about the stock market crash of 1929. And we are also going to understand and interpret line graphs. And we will also be writing a description of a graph and a concluding paragraph. Okay, first off, let's watch this video and take notes.
October 29th, 1929, the New York Stock Exchange had its worst day ever, Black Tuesday. The stock market crashed, and investors lost billions of dollars in a single day. That day was the end of a decade of a strong U.S. economy. It was the beginning of the Great Depression, the worst economic period in modern world history. During the next 2 years, stock prices fell 90%. Banks and companies failed, and millions of people around the world lost their jobs. Today, you can visit the Museum of Financial History on Wall Street in New York City to learn more about what happened.
So what we have here is the physical tape from October 29th, that Black Tuesday, and it's quite an important piece. It tells a great story.
This is a replica of the machine that produced that ticker tape. The name ticker tape comes from the sound of the machine as it printed out the price of stocks and shares. But since the early 1970s, computers and electronic boards have reported the ups and downs in the stock market.
Okay, let's talk about the discussion questions. And if you would like to follow along, please go to page 171. Okay, our first question is, what are the biggest economic problems in the world today? I would definitely say COVID-19 is going to cause the biggest economic problems for many reasons. One is that many people have lost their jobs due to the virus. So a lot of small businesses have closed, and many people are out of work these days. And the more people that go out of work, the less things they buy, the more that consumer confidence decreases. If consumer confidence decreases, that means there is less investment in the stock market. So I assume that the stock market will not recover. The economy will not recover for quite some time. So I think that was the biggest economic problem right now. As some people mentioned in their essays, another big problem is the wealth gap. So there are many, I read many people's essays where they pointed out that there are many wealthy people, or few wealthy people, and many poor people, but the gap is very big. The disappearing middle class, as they call it. So I think that those are a lot of the biggest economic problems in the world today, for sure. How do changes in the economy affect my daily life? I would say that if the economy worsens, one side effect could be rising interest rates. Another side effect could be loss of employment, less jobs. So those are some ways that the economy could affect my daily life. So think about your individual answers. If you have a small business, maybe that could be something that could affect your daily life. Or if you work for someone who owns a small business, that could be very harmful for you these days. Do you think the economy will be better or worse in 10 years, and why? I would say right now that things are definitely unsustainable. So if we have any other crisis like COVID-19, I think the economy will be worse. But I think if things get better, maybe the economy will get better. So I think the economy is kind of just a reflection of where we are as a society. Like if things are very poor in our society, that is really, you can really see that reflected in the economy. So I think that we have to make some big changes to get better. I hope we can get better, but I think there's going to be a time of suffering a bad economy in the next few years. But hopefully by 10 years, I hope we can recover. I hope. I don't want to have a bad economy. Okay, at this time, I would like to watch another short video. I thought we could examine the 2008 financial crisis. So let's watch this short video about the 2008 financial crisis, and let's talk about that.
In the world of finance, we are often quick to forget the tragedies of the past, yet valuable lessons are to be had by exploring their causes and effects. After all, in a world of ever-changing rules, products, and services, history is the one constant that can guide us through the ambiguity. So let's take a 5-minute history lesson on today's Plain Bagel. It's the early 2000s, and investors are looking for new, safe sources of return. Stocks and bonds are still pretty popular, but the tech bubble at the turn of the century showed them that getting your money back from bankrupt firms can be a bit difficult. But what about mortgages? That's right, mortgages, the loan you take out when you want to buy a home. After all, for mortgage lenders, these loans are a lot like bonds with bonuses. You receive regular interest payments, and if the borrower defaults, you get possession of their house, which is a handy fallback because with real estate prices on the rise, recovering your losses is no problem. But investors don't want to buy the individual mortgages of Kate, Sue, and Bill down the road. No, my friend, that's where investment banks come in. These institutions, with their large capital and industry expertise, decide to buy up mountains of mortgages from lenders, pool them together, and then sell shares of the pool to investors as mortgage-backed securities, meaning that home buyers now pay investors their mortgage payments. Ain't that nifty? Investors sure think so, and soon enough people are flocking to investment banks to buy up their securities. And it's not just banks doing this. The government, in an attempt to boost mortgage lending, is using the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, two sponsored corporations, to do the same thing. Soon enough, lenders are facing a seemingly endless demand for their mortgages, which they're more than happy to part with, because every time they sell the rights to their interest payments, they get their money back, which they can loan out again. So mortgage lending and home buying kick into hyperdrive, and investors are getting pretty rich in the process. But other companies, seeing the gravy train running full speed in the investment space, are feeling left out, and insurers, wanting to cash in too, begin to sell credit default swaps, derivatives that pay out if a mortgage borrower defaults. It looks like a foolproof way of making money. In fact, why stop at just one policy per property when there are speculators interested in buying them too? Sure, selling 10 policies on the same mortgage may seem excessive and dangerous, but so long as we don't experience a collapse in the real estate market, it's free money. Soon enough, the amount of credit insured jumps from $900 billion to over $62 trillion. And while we probably don't have enough money to cover that, so long as things keep trucking along, insurers are making bank. And all is right in the world, with rising housing supporting this great supply chain that we've created. Or at least that's what's supposed to be happening. But something's changing. Because lenders are selling their loans, they've lost all incentive to avoid risk. And with such a high demand for their mortgages, they're starting to give loans to borrowers with bad credit scores and low income. And hold on a sec, some of those subprime loans are predatory. Don't be fooled, borrower. That may look like a low interest mortgage, but it's chock full of terrible conditions. But the subprime borrowers don't seem to notice the fine print. And soon enough, everyone is buying a home, despite some having no possible way of paying off their mortgage. And investment banks are still gobbling up whatever the lenders are throwing at them, meaning that these ticking time bombs are making their way into the MBSs owned by investors. But that's not all. Investment banks are selling collateralized debt obligations similar to the MBS but riskier, and claiming that they're virtually risk-free, even as they fill up with these toxic assets. But that's not all again. Despite there only being so many mortgages to invest in, people are using complex derivative investments like synthetic CDOs to bet even more on whether people will make the mortgage payments, which, in case you haven't noticed, is becoming less likely. Now, surely the rating agencies will notice the heightened default risk and let investors know, hey, by the way, your holdings are full of crap. But wait, Are you kidding? AAA safety rating? Well, everyone, we've done it. We now have a system where lenders don't care about whether mortgage payments are made, investment bankers don't care about risk, and the rating agencies, designed for the people but paid for by the banks, don't care about investors. And for a while, this web of liability and risk holds firm, but it's only a matter of time before the subprime borrowers start to default. And by October 2007, 3% of all US home loans are in the foreclosure process, with another 7% 1 month past due. Mortgage investments are starting to turn into real estate, and investment banks are flooding the market with foreclosed homes. Soon enough, supply is starting to outpace demand, and in 2008, housing prices do something that nobody prepared for. They start to free fall. And so begins the domino effect that was the 2008 financial crisis. Finance companies involved in the real estate game take a hit. And despite 75% of CDOs receiving the highest safety rating, 70% of them default. Investment banks, seeing the carnage they've caused, stop buying mortgages from lenders, and the insurers find themselves facing impossible payouts. Banks, lenders, and insurers start to shut down. And despite the government trying to save the largest players from the brink of destruction, on September 15th, we see the largest bankruptcy in US history, as Lehman Brothers, an investment bank with $600 billion in assets, goes under. At this point, anyone with money to spare pulls it out of the markets and places it into treasury bonds, which leads the Dow Jones to lose a third of its value. And companies relying on loans to operate suddenly lose access to vital financing. Countries with ties to the US are caught up in the disaster too. By 2009, the global economic engine stalls. 2 million American jobs would be lost in the last 4 months of 2008 alone. And while the recession would technically end in June 2009, the impact of the crisis would be felt for long afterwards. And the kicker to it all, despite financial institutions causing the whole disaster, they received the most money from the government's rescue attempts. While the Dodd-Frank Act would be introduced in 2010 to crack down on the lending practices of financial institutions, one would hope that we never again need regulation to remind us that greed should never trump common sense and decency.
Okay, at this time, we're going to do a little bit of reading, and I would like you to follow along on page 177. So let's look at this reading. In almost every country and every culture, parents work hard to try to give their children a richer, more successful, and comfortable life than they had. For decades following the Second World War, this dream became a reality in many countries around the world. Possibly the best example is the Japanese economic miracle, when Japan, thanks to an extremely high rate of economic growth from the 1960s to the 1980s, developed into one of the world's strongest economies. Yet in Japan, as in other developed nations, many people today are not able to enjoy the same standard of living as their parents before them. This is because in recent years, incomes have declined while expenditure has risen. In effect, this means many people are actually poorer than they were 10 or 20 years ago. Falling incomes are the first sign of a declining standard of living. In the United States, for instance, incomes rose during the 1970s, began falling in the 1980s, and reached their low point during the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. The years since then have seen a slow recovery, yet according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the median income in 2006 was $59,039, nearly the same as in 1999. Similarly, in the United Kingdom, the average household income of £25,700 in 2016 was nearly the same as that in 2007. The other key factor which influences people's standard of living is expenditure. Worldwide, prices for necessities such as rent and food have been rising. As an example, Figure 1 shows the percentage of their income that Americans spend on 5 key categories between 2000 and 2016. housing, food, transport, entertainment, and health. Until 2015, the costs in these 5 categories remained more or less stable. That is, Americans spent approximately 20% of their incomes on housing, about 10% on food, 8% on transport, and around 3% each on entertainment and health. As the graph shows, most of these costs continued to jump in 2015 and have continued to rise. In the United States and in many other countries, the most important cause of rising expenditure over time is the high cost of housing. In many cities worldwide, there is a critical shortage of houses and apartments to buy and rent, and this has driven up costs. Also, healthcare costs continue to rise as prescription costs have become more and more expensive. Transport and food prices have also increased significantly in recent years. So in conclusion, the combination of rising prices and falling incomes has left many people with less spending power than they had in previous decades. Because consumers must pay more for essentials like food, healthcare, and especially housing, they have less money for education, investment, savings, and small luxuries like eating in restaurants. And for many people, the dream of living in a greater comfort and security than their parents must seem very distant indeed. Okay, so we just read, and let's answer some of the discussion questions about the reading on page 178. Okay, so we read that. What was the example of countries that became richer in the decades following the Second World War? Well, in the essay, they use the example of Japan, and I also think America was a country that became richer after the Second World War, as I remember from American history. So there were a lot of countries, I think a lot of European countries as well got richer. So many countries got richer after the Second World War. So we also watched that video about the housing crisis in 2008. And what were some of the causes of a shortage of housing in cities worldwide? Well, so the economic recession in 2008 would have been one of the causes of the shortage of housing worldwide. And they explain that pretty well in the video. Some of the problems were that people took out loans for the banks, but then the banks went and they sold those, those mortgages, that debt, to another bank, and it just became a huge, mess. And also they were giving loans to people who shouldn't have loans. And eventually it just became like a big bubble, and it was a huge disaster. So that would have been the reason of the shortage of houses, because people are not going to take out loans, so there's no demand for housing, and then in turn that's going to create a shortage. Okay, if the average American earned around $59,000 in 2016, how much did that person spend on housing? Okay, so it's going to be a percentage. Let's see I forget what the percentage is. So let's go back and look. Okay, so it looks like they spent about 20% of their income on housing. You can see that here. The Americans spent approximately 20% of their incomes on housing. So let's go back and look at the question again. Okay, so the question is, if they spent $59,000 on housing, I'm really bad at math, so let's think 10% of 60,000 would be about $6,000. So if you double that, so they probably spent $12,000 on housing. Okay. Okay, we're going to look at some more questions on page 178. Okay, the first one is, do people in most developed countries have more, less, or about the same amount of money to invest as they did before the Great Recession of 2008, and why? Do they have more? I would say, for me personally, like, I don't think my income has increased that much. And I think expenses have risen. And also, I'm older, so I have children, and, I have aging parents and debt and stuff like that. So I don't think that, I don't have extra money to invest in anything. Especially at this time, we're going into a really scary time. So the questions they're asking are kind of funny right now, because I don't think, I think people are not going to be investing in the stock market nowadays. So yeah, definitely because of the COVID situation and everything, I don't think people are going to have that extra money to invest. Yeah. They're going to be living paycheck to paycheck, which means they're just going to be worried about rent, housing, food, and maybe education. Korea, it's pretty important to get an education, so that's going to be a big item. Okay, number 2, if someone's income is falling and expenditure is rising, is it a good idea to try to take money by investing in the stock market or gold, etc.? Why or why not? Well, that's a hard question for me. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know a lot about money. But to me, it seems like not a good idea, because if you don't have money to survive, I don't think you should try to invest it in the stock market. I think gold is always, I think it's safe to buy gold, because gold never really, sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down, but it's always valuable. But I think if you are someone who's not making a lot of money, one of my friends told me once, she said you should always pay off your loans before starting to save money. I thought that was a really good piece of advice. So always, before you start saving your money, make sure that you pay off all your debt, because the interest rate for the debt is going to be higher than the interest rate for savings. So yeah, probably you should try to take care of your own needs and pay off your debts, I think. What has happened to income and expenditure in your country since 1996, and why? Well, I'm American, so you just saw the example of my country. So I think, but I can also speak for Korea, I think, because I've been here a long time. So when I first came to Korea, for an English Hagwon teacher, the salary is exactly the same as when I came, and I'm a little bit afraid to tell you when I came to Korea, because you might be shocked. So I actually came in 2007, right before the financial crisis, interesting enough. So I wasn't really that affected by it, to be honest. But yeah, I came right around 2007 to Korea. And so it's coming up my 13th year anniversary. So, but to be honest with you, the salary for an English teacher in a Hagwon is exactly the same as 13 years ago. So, yeah, but prices have doubled since I've been here. So, crazy, right? So I imagine that is affecting everyone in Korea, whether you're, a businessman or, whatever your job is. I'm sure the salary is not really, it's not going up from what I know. And yeah, definitely the cost of living. Like when I first came here, taking a taxi, for example, it was so cheap, and I just love that about Korea, how cheap it was. And then, yeah, but over time, it's really expensive, and the wages are not increasing. So it's kind of sad. Yeah, so I think it's the same way in America too, but I've been living in Korea so long. But I know nowadays, like a lot of people, they want to increase the minimum wage in America because it's not enough to live. Yeah, you need more money for sure. Okay, let's look at page 180, and we're going to talk about a graph. And the graph was based on the essay. Okay, so our questions are, what trend or main idea does the graph show? I think that the main idea is that it's talking about expenditures and how they have increased in relation to a person's income. So for example, you can see that housing has increased in relation to a person's income. So it's went up from 20 to 25% in 2016. So housing is increasing, and the salary is not really increasing in relation. What is the meaning of the numbers on the left side of the graph? These numbers here, they are just the percentage of the person's income. So if you're making $100,000 a year, and your housing is 20% of your income, then that means that you are spending $20,000 on housing. It's increased to $25,000, so it would be $25,000. So that's just the meaning of the numbers on the left side of the column. Which years are covered from the graph? Well, we can see here it says 98 until 2016. That's a pretty simple question. Why does the graph have 5 lines in different colors? What does each color mean? Okay, so the different lines are the different expenditures. So we have housing and related, entertainment, food, transport, and health. And so you can see that those colors relate to the key here. Okay, so housing is red, food is purple, transport is green, and so on. What percentage of their income did Americans spend on food in 2016? Okay, we can see food is the purple one. Okay, it was around 10%, but it kind of increased maybe 12% or 13% around 2016. So maybe the food cost increased at that time. I should say 2000. From 2000 to 2006, did the percentage of income that Americans spent on transportation increase or decrease? It looks like it stayed the same to me, so it looks like it has been steady as far as I can see. Okay, the next question is, what trend do you see starting in 2006? Is it the same for all 5 types of expenditure? You can see housing, it really decreased. You can also see food really decreased. Entertainment, transport, health, and entertainment pretty much stayed the same. Okay, so you can see that a lot of things decreased at that time, and that was the cause for the crash. Okay, and we have another set of questions on page 181. Let's check those out. The first one is, the graph shows one trend between 2000 and 2006, and another between 2000 and 2016. How do you explain these trends? Very simply, we can explain the trend with the financial crisis of 2008. You can see very clearly on the graph that all of these lines are going down around that time. So that's obviously the cause for a lot of problems. I don't know what is going on around here, but something crazy, I guess. I don't know why prices are going up and salaries are not increasing. I think it's just a problem of, maybe they need to raise the minimum wage, the government. Between 2000 and 2016, which of the 5 types of expenditures went up and down most often? Why do you think this expenditure changed more than any of the others? Definitely housing went down and then it went up. And let's see, what else went down a lot? It looks like transport and food kind of went a little bit crazy too. And entertainment and health didn't really change. Why do you think? It says, which one did you think go up more often? I think housing probably was the one that went up the most often. And I think it was because of the financial crisis was directly related to the housing crisis. So I think because that they were giving out those bad loans to people that devalued the houses, and then they went up again. So yeah, I think that's what happened there. Which expenditure did not change between 2000 and 2014, and why? It looks like that probably health and entertainment didn't change that much. I'm not sure why. Well, actually, I don't know what they mean by health, because I think that health costs have really increased. So I'm not sure if they mean just health, like going to the gym or something. So why did they not change? Well, I think entertainment is I don't think if you have noticed, I don't think going to the movies has really gotten more expensive or less expensive, because a lot of people are just downloading stuff off the internet illegally. So I mean, it's not really there's not enough demand to have a high price for going to the movie or something. So I think that's why that hasn't changed, in my opinion, but that's just my guess. What happened in 2015? Do you think this change was caused by a particular event, or is it normal for expenditure to change this way from time to time? I don't really recall anything special happening in 2015 that I'm aware of. I think, I don't remember what happened in 2015. I don't think there was anything that happened. I think it's just, in my opinion, I think it's just lack of government interference. To be honest, I think this is just if the market is just free to do whatever it wants, I think that it could do, if the government is not regulating, I think it kind of gets out of control after a while. Also, no, there was the fiscal cliff time, and that was when the what happened was the US Treasury, they put a lot of money into the economy. I think it was around that time. So maybe that's why things kind of went crazy, because I think that the US was actually in a lot of debt at that time, so they had to print off more money or make more money, and I think that's what caused the inflation. Maybe. That's my guess. Anyway, but I'm not an economist, so I'm not sure. But I think I recall very vaguely that at that time there was there was going to be like a fiscal cliff where the US was in debt, and then they had to make more money in the Federal Reserve. And I think that might have been what did it. I'm not sure though. If anybody knows, feel free to comment. And the next question is, based on the information in the graph, what can you conclude? Oh, what can you conclude? And why can't I see it? That's another problem. What can you conclude about the Americans' standard of living in 2016? Well, you could see it's going down. So the standard of living is about what you can get for your money. So it doesn't matter how much money you're making, but if you're spending more on housing or you're spending more on food, then your standard of living is going down. So definitely going down. Yeah. Okay, this time we're going to talk about writing a concluding paragraph. And a concluding paragraph of an academic essay should end the essay without adding any new main ideas. It should be, and I think a lot of people messed up on the test on that question. There was something about, it talked about studying English versus Chinese, and it said, oh, another example is my friend studied Chinese and he got a great job. So you can't add new examples in the conclusion. So I noticed that was one test question that a lot of people missed. And it should be shorter than the body of the essay. So you don't want to add a lot of new information at the end. It doesn't make sense. And typically this paragraph has 3 parts. Let's check out the parts. Okay, so we have a transition phrase, and I will explain these in detail. A restatement or repetition of the thesis statement from the introduction. A final comment, yeah, and I'll explain about all these in just a minute. Let's take a look at those. Went too far. Okay, so the first part is a transition phase. And that's going to link between the conclusion and the previous paragraphs. So for example, you could use the transition phrase in conclusion, in short, in summary, to summarize, to sum up, or to conclude. So those are a few examples. If you can think of any else, try those out as well. So you could try some of these out to do a transition phrase. And the transition phrase just lets everybody know that you're doing the conclusion at this time. The next one is the restatement of thesis statement. So thesis statement was in the introduction, and we're going to put it in the conclusion as well. But you're going to change the word, kind of like paraphrasing, if you remember paraphrasing. And in the restatement of the thesis statement, we're going to change, you can change the order of phrases or clauses, just like paraphrasing, or you can use different words for same concepts, or you could use basically synonyms. Okay, and then you're going to have the final comment. So that's the final part of the concluding paragraph. And for the final comment, you could have an opinion, your personal opinion, a prediction about the future, a recommendation, or a call to action. A call to action is to gather people to do something, okay? Okay, why don't we look at this conclusion sentence to discover where these terms are. Okay, so the first part was the transition phrase. So here, where can you find the transition phase? I wonder if anyone can find that. If anyone can find, I can find it. It's right here, in conclusion. In conclusion, this is our transition phrase right here, the in conclusion. Okay, and the second question was, where is the restatement or repetition about the thesis statement from the introduction? Okay, let's find that. Okay, so we have the combination of rising. The combination of rising prices and falling incomes has left many people with less spending power than they had in previous decades. Because consumers must pay more for essential food like food, healthcare, especially housing, they have less money for education, investment savings, and small luxuries like eating in restaurants. So I think that the thesis statement would be just a simple summary: the combination of rising prices and falling incomes has left many people with less spending power. Okay, so that would be your restatement of your thesis statement. Okay, and we're gonna also look for the final comment. It seems like this would be the final comment since it's final. For many people, the dream of living in greater comfort and security for their parents must seem very distant indeed. So what kind of thing would you be? I think it would be, would it be a prediction? Would it be a recommendation? A call to action? I think it would be, I think it would be kind of a, yeah, I think it would be common to conclude, to state the possible effects of the data. So I think it's about talking about the data and what are the effects on the average American. Okay, so that would be your answer. All right. Well, signing off and see you guys later. Okay, so we're going to have a bonus round today, just a few conversation starters. Some of these questions, please remember that some about money may be considered too personal to ask anyone who is not a very close friend or family member. How much did you spend on presents last year? Okay, for me, I think that, you know, usually for my kids, I buy a lot of presents. So I don't really know how much I spent. Probably, you know, thousands of dollars, I think. So yeah, hundreds or thousands of dollars for children. How much do I spend each day? Well, I really like coffee. So I spend a lot of money on coffee. I probably spend, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 won on a cup of coffee. And then when I'm working, you know, when I was working at Sungcheol University before COVID, I would go and I'd have lunch at the Hakyo Shiktang, so like the, you know, the cafeteria, and that's about 5,000 or 6,000 won. So yeah, and transportation, maybe, I don't know, how much is transportation? Like 3,000 won. So I probably spend, you know, like, I don't know, 20,000 a day maybe. But I'm sure I probably spend more on my kids because my kids are always asking me to buy things. Am I a price conscious shopper? Yes, I am. I really like sales, and yeah, I love sales. But nowadays, with my kids, of course, they're always asking me to buy stuff, and they're really spoiled from grandma, from Halmoni. So I have to buy them everything. It's crazy. Are you saving money to buy something? You know, I'm really interested in things like running, and I need a new pair of running shoes, and I also need a new GPS watch, and yeah, I'd like to have one with a map on it so I could see where I'm going. But yeah, mine is not that great. Mine is very simple. So I want a new GPS watch. I want new running shoes. I want new clothes. Yeah, so I guess I'm saving money for those things. I also need a new laptop because I'm really struggling to make videos and do online teaching with my old laptop. It's terrible. I think I bought it in maybe 2012 or 2013. So I need a new laptop. How much would it cost? It's been a long time since I bought a computer, but I guess it would probably cost, you know, hundreds or thousands of dollars. So yeah, I'm waiting a while. How much longer? Maybe when I get my COVID relief money, I can buy it, I hope. Do banks pay a higher % of interest here or in your country? I think that Korean banks have a pretty good interest rate, from my understanding. Um, and I think that American interest rates are pretty low unless you have a lot of money, and then you can't take it out for a long time, like an IRA Roth account. If you have, $1,000 and you put it in there, but you can't touch it for like 10 or 20 years, I think. So it's really hard to save money like that. Do I compare prices at different stores when I shop? That sounds like a lot of work to me. So, I think like when I stayed at home with my kids, like when I was a housewife, sometimes I would do that. I noticed that sometimes if you buy things from the Shijang, from the traditional market, it's a bit cheaper than buying things from the mart like Emart. Um, so sometimes I would try to shop at the traditional market, and it was much cheaper. But nowadays I don't have that much time, so I don't really have time to compare prices. The next question is, do you enjoy shopping? When I was younger, like in my 20s, I really liked shopping, but nowadays it makes me really tired. I don't know why, but when I was young, I loved to go clothes shopping, and I would always go to department stores, and I go to the mall, and I loved it. And I would do that like after school, like after university classes. Um, it's kind of funny, when I went to university, we had to park in a shopping mall because there was no parking, and take a shuttle bus from the shopping mall. So after my classes in university, sometimes I would go shopping every day after class. It was really bad. Um, do I ever buy secondhand things? When I was a teenager, it was kind of cool to have secondhand things, used things. So it was cool to buy your clothes from the thrift shop. It was called like grunge fashion, and we used to wear like thrift store clothes, and that was really cool back then. So yeah, but nowadays I don't really like that, because you can just buy new clothes for pretty cheap. You don't really have to go to the secondhand store, because sometimes the secondhand store is more expensive. So I would rather not. Do I ever give money to charity? Sure, yeah, I give money to charity. Yeah, how often? Like when I go to church, I think they were asking for, some charity donation, like maybe once a month. So maybe once a month or so. Do I gamble? I have in the past. I don't, but in my hometown, you can kind of, if you go to the next city, it's pretty close. It's just over the river, and they have casino riverboats in my hometown. So yeah, when I was in my 20s, I liked to go to the casino, but I was really bad at gambling, so I never won anything. So it wasn't really that enjoyable to me. So I don't really enjoy gambling at all, because I don't win. And the next question is, do you give tips at restaurants in your country, and how about taxi drivers? Yeah, in America, definitely you have to tip your waiter or waitress, and for good service, you have to give them 20% of your bill. For average service, probably 15%, and for poor service, maybe 10%. How about to taxi drivers? Yes, to taxi drivers, you can give them $1 or $2. Yeah, you have to tip everyone in America, so it's really expensive to tip. Yeah, for sure. That's what I like about Korea. No tipping. It's very comfortable. But the servers are not as kind as they are in America. In America, they're very kind because they get tips. Do I haggle when I shop? Haggle means you try to negotiate the price. In America, it's kind of weird to haggle, because usually the price is just set. So I don't haggle when I shop. I feel really uncomfortable when I haggle. Do I have a credit card? I think I mentioned in the lecture that I'm not a fan of credit cards because I think the interest is too high. Like when I was talking about the financial crisis in America, and I had a credit card at that time, and the interest rate went up to 30% suddenly because of the financial crisis, and that scared me off of having credit cards. Like after that, I just want to avoid having a credit card at all costs. I don't want a credit card. So yeah, my husband, I think he has some credit cards, but I let him deal with that. He says the Korean credit cards are really good and they don't have a high interest rate, but I don't want to have American credit cards. They're terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Okay, I think let's take a break here, and I think this will finish us up for today.